Okay, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good evening. I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone. I'm not sure what the sense is there, but I can only tell you that here in Eretz Yisrael, it's really like the country is in mourning. It's really been since last Thursday night, the tragedy that took place in Meron. It's really been it's been a very heavy time. There's people very aware of what's going on. There's if you put it in perspective, there's over 750 people sitting shiva right now, which is like a staggering, at the same time, and 750 people sitting shiva for young people, siblings sitting for siblings, parents sitting for children, spouses, wives sitting for husbands. And it's just incredible, and it's been a heavy time, and it's a time. There's no responses. There's no answers. I will say that there's been very inappropriate reactions. That a lot of finger pointing and blaming, which is certainly not the time now. There will be a time. I mean, there's a conversation that needs to happen about safety and about these kinds of sites and these kinds of events. All that needs to take place. But right now, everyone is reeling, and it needs to be felt that it's a Klal Yisrael tragedy. It's not any one sector tragedy. It's not any one type of person tragedy. It's a tragedy for all of Klal Yisrael. And many people are taking it that way, and unfortunately, there are those that are not so aware of that, and not so cognizant of it, and it's sort of been dealing with a lot of these kinds of things. I mean, get on to the mission in a minute. I think just a small perspective thing I think is necessary. For those that are on my YouTube channel, so Friday I put out something on the Parsha. Every week I put out something on the Parsha. This week I spoke about the tragedy, and it was like a gut reaction. It was when I say knee jerk, there was nothing wrong with it, but I'm saying it was in the moment. It was in the moment. It was we found out it Thursday night, and Friday morning, really, I put out this thing, and I think that it's kedai to listen to. If you have an opportunity to go to the website, to the YouTube channel, you can find it on YouTube. Just type in my name in Parshas Emor. I mean, it'll come up, and I mean that without repeating that now, I think that it's important to look at. But I think there's another thing I want to share, and this will. I'm making commercials myself, but this will be on the podcast with my son. My son and I make, Aaron and I make a podcast every week, and we send it out. And we made a podcast this last night, and very dramatic, and I think very real. And one of the things that we spoke about was that when things like this happen, it's impossible to get a perspective on it right away. If you think about it, when we talk about the destruction of the temple, so we talk about that the temple was destroyed because of sinas chinam, because of unjustified hatred. When we talk about the sphira, right, in the morning that we do during the counting of the Omer, we say that we're doing that because Rabbi Kiva's students, lo nagu kavod zebazad, they didn't show proper honor to each other. And we give reasons for things. It happened because of this, and we know that it happened because of this. And yet when we talk about the Holocaust, we would never, only fools dare to say, oh, it happened because of this. And when we talk about tragedies that are even fresher and newer, it's almost prohibited to say it happened because of this. And we have to realize that this is something, it's a 70 hours, 800 hours old. It's just happened. We have no perspective whatsoever. No perspective, no idea. There's no clue. The one thing that we do know is that when Adam HaRishon sinned in the Garden of Eden and God came into the garden, God said to Adam HaRishon, who was hiding under a tree, he said the word ayeka, which we translate as, where are you? It's not possible that that's what God was asking. God knew exactly where Adam HaRishon was. He knew he was hiding under the tree. He knew he thought he could hide from God. God knew God's God. He knew the situation. So what was he asking him when he said to him, Ayeka, where are you? He wasn't asking him where he was geographically. He was asking him where he was spiritually. Where are you in terms of our relationship? Where are you in terms of the connection between you and I, Ayeka? Where are you? This question of Ayeka is asked to us from that moment throughout time. When we read Tisha B'Av night, and we sit on the floor and we read the Book of Lamentations, the Book of Lamentations begins with the word Eicha. The word Eicha is the exact same word as Ayeka. Aleph, Yud, Chaf, Hey, just with different vowelizations. And we're being asked that question. Ayeka, where are you? Where are you in your relationship to God that this could happen? And this call has been coming out to Klal Yisrael from the beginning of time. It now comes out every day from Mount Sinai. The Talmud tells us that every single day there's a voice that God cries out every day. Ayeka, where are you? Where are you in terms of our relationship? One of the incredible things, very sad things that they say is that night, Thursday night, after they cleared out all of the mesim and they basically cleared out the site, there was a lot of debris, a lot of eyeglasses and a lot of cell phones. And the cell phones were still ringing because people didn't know yet where their loved ones were. And, when your cell phone rings, so you have a name comes up of who's calling or a number. And some of the people that were working for that solo were very moved by this, that all they kept seeing was, mommy, tati, my dear brother, sister. Those are the names that people put in their cell phones for the people that were calling them. And the phones were just ringing and ringing and ringing, and nobody was answering them. I spoke to somebody yesterday who told me that their kids were there. I can't tell you over Shabbos how many people, had to be, I can't say counseling, but like people just needed to talk, and there was a boy, 15-year-old boy, who had to spend time with over Shabbos. He was there. He had left right at the time, but it was right before that. But he was there. He was right there. It was very fresh to him. There were kids that went. There were people that went that their cell phone was off, or they didn't know what happened. So they didn't know to call home because they had no idea what happened. All they knew is that, they were, let's say they had left already. They were sitting on a bus, and they were on their way back to Yerushalayim or wherever it was that they were coming from. And like everything was normal to them. They had no idea what was happening in the place that they just were. But their parents or their children were sitting at home flipping out, hearing that there were 40, at that point it was 44 dead, and they're hearing that there were 44 dead. They didn't know what to do, and they were calling and calling and calling and calling and calling, and they weren't getting responses because there was no cell phone reception in the area. One person said that until most of the night they assumed that their children had been killed. They couldn't get through to them. They assumed the worst. It was only about 4:30 in the morning that they finally got through to their kids. Can you imagine what those hours were like of not knowing if this was your family or not your family? So Kadosh Baruch Hu calls out to us. He calls us every single day. And he's just waiting for us to pick up the phone, to answer, and to say, hi. Every single day. This is a call from the Ribbon Shalom to his children. It's Tati, it's Daddy calling out to his children. What he's going to say when we say hello, who knows? Why he's calling us, what particular thing he's calling us about right now, who knows? But the one thing we do know is that when things like this happen, he's calling out to us. And he's calling out to us and he's saying to us, come closer. Pick up the phone and hear my voice. It's no different message that you'll hear from me anytime. Anytime that there's some event like this. In the beginning of Corona, I felt exactly the same way. I had no idea and still have no idea what the heck that whole thing was about. Why the world has been twisted this way, I have no idea. Maybe in 2,000 years from now, we'll be able to say, and Corona happened because, but it doesn't matter. Because it's not about what it was about. It's about that it was a call from the Ribbon Shalom to his people. Whenever things happen in the world, it's a Kadosh Baruch Hu calling us. Ayeka, look at your relationship. Where are you in terms of your relationship to me? And I think that's the critical thing, is that we recognize that this is a call to us. There are so many things that we can in our own lives, in personal lives, that we can look at and say, for me, if this was a phone call for me, so then this is the way I would answer it. In the terms of Klal Yisrael, in terms of the entire Jewish nation, you don't even have to open your eyes. You could do this one with your eyes closed. What is it that God would be sending us a message about? I don't know. I can't figure it out. Yeah, I think that every smart human being, I think even pretty stupid human beings could figure it out also. Just look at it. Look at the state of Klal Yisrael. Just look at the word klal. The Jewish people, the Jewish nation. How nation-like are we? How klal, the word klal is from the word kol, all-inclusive. How all-inclusive are we? How all-accepting are we? How all-loving are we? If things like this allow us to be able to look at it and say 45 of our finest, beautiful, most beautiful karbonos were sacrificed. So maybe it just means that we need to grab onto each other a little more. If that's what a person takes away from it, that's answering the call. Doesn't matter what the particular response is. Doesn't, if you listen to the way people answer the telephone, so you always hear people answering the telephone because nobody's quiet when they answer the telephone, right? So you answer the telephone, hello, yo, how you doing, dude? Right? It's like everybody's got different things to say. So we all have a different way of answering the phone. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is calling. We're answering. It's going to be different for everybody. But just has to be answered. And that's where I'm holding today. That's what's flying through my mind. That's that's the way I'm processing. My heart is broken for all these families. Yeah, for all these families that are sitting shiva and that are having to endure this. Father went with 5 children to Meron. Going to Meron, unfortunately, there's so many people that put a negative spin on it and they say such stupid negative things about it. It is a religious experience. It's a holy place. It's a holy time. Whether it's in some of ours Judaism, who cares? But it is a real thing. Father went with his 5 children, and he came home with 3. Just but you listen to that guy, and that guy said, "God, you took 2 of my children, but you can't take away my bitachon. You can't take away my trust, and you can't take away my faith in you." It's easy, for somebody sitting on the sidelines to say that a parent says that. That's incredible. There was a boy whose brother was killed. He and his father were there, and the father and the whole family was injured. The father and the son had to be brought by ambulance to the levaya, to the funeral, and they interviewed the boy. He was he was being crushed. And it's very hard to know the exact story, but what seems is, when you hear the word stampede, you think of crazy people that are just walking and going in frenzy, and that wasn't that, according to all eyewitness accounts. That wasn't what happened. What happened was that it was, for some reason, there was a way out that was closed. It was one of the there are many fires that night, and many Hasidic rabbis come and light the fires for their groups, and they have a whole celebration, a whole thing. So one of them had finished, and another one was going to start. So it was like an end of a period, and people were leaving, and there was a walkway closed off. Whether it was because somebody had a heart attack, it's not clear exactly, but nobody told the people on top that it was closed on the bottom. So people were still streaming through. When you say people, you're talking about that there was over 100,000 people in not a particularly large site, and people kept streaming through. So it just bottled up, and people were being crushed. It wasn't trampled. It wasn't like a stampede with people running over other people. It's literally people were being crushed against the end where it was closed off. And the descriptions from eyewitnesses was horrific. What took place? So this kid was buried under bodies, and he said, they said, "What were you thinking?" He said, I thought I was going to die." And what were you thinking? He says, all I was thinking is that Hashem, whatever's going to happen, whatever you want to do to me, I have bitachon, I have emunah, I have trust, and I have faith in you. That's from a 9-year-old kid. Parents certainly did something right with that child, infusing them with incredible faith in God. So I have to listen to those stories and listen to what people have to say to understand what people are. It's not to understand what happened, but to understand what people are and what people of faith are. Anyway, there's a lot to learn and a lot to feel. It's also another interesting thing. I've noticed there are people that, when things like this happen, have a need to connect themselves to that thing. Like, people will say, "Oh, I was there. I left 3 hours before, but I was there. I know that person's aunt's mother, sister's brother's cousin." I'm not making fun of it or putting it down, but this is like anything. Like in any tragedy that happens, people need to connect themselves because they need to feel. In order to feel something, you need to feel connected to it. And I think that that's also a tremendous lesson to us, that we don't need to know anything. I don't need to know names. I don't need to know faces. I don't need to know anything. I need to know 45 people died and 750 people sitting shiva, and that doesn't include all the grandparents and all the aunts and uncles and all the friends. Right? That's only the people that have an obligation to sit shiva. Klal Yisrael took a hit. It's the whole Jewish people took a hit. And if nothing else, it needs to make us feel part of Klal Yisrael, part of the Jewish people. A lot of times when things happen in Israel, I'm sure you all get it, over the years, people will come to you on the street and they'll say, like when there's a terrorist attack, I've had this happen to me enormous amounts of times. People will come, well, I'm a bit of an obvious Jew, but people would come to me and they would say to me, oh, we're so sorry about what happened in Israel. I'm thinking like, it has nothing to do with me. And then you realize, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. If it happened to my land and if it happened to my people, then it happened to me. And I think that here in Eretz Yisrael, everyone is feeling that way. And I think that it's a little bit harder to muster that in America. I'm not putting it down. I'm not one of those people that makes Aliyah and then looks at everybody else as if they're sinners, right? Looks down on everybody who stays in America. Not one of those guys. I'm surrounded by those people, but I'm not one of them. But it is harder. It's just I understand that it's harder. It's not you're much more removed and much more removed also socially from demographically from this group of people. Nevertheless, I think that's also another important thing to walk away with, that this is something that happened to Klal Yisrael and that we're part of Klal Yisrael. And as members of Klal Yisrael, this is something that happens to us. Anyway, these are just some of my thoughts, and I just, I just wanted to share and just bring out some of the feelings. I said in this, you should listen to it because it just comes with a certain impact. But when the world is filled with something like this, so then one of our reactions needs to be to fill it with positive things. When the world is filled with so much pain, then the way to counter pain is by filling it with so much beauty and so much light. And, if you're ever thinking about doing a chesed, now's the time to do it. If you're ever thinking about, that person I wanted to reach out to and I wanted to, to do something for a person, now is the exact time to do it. Because on a spiritual level, the world, there's a pall that's over the Jewish world right now. And the way to counteract that pole is to counteract it with tremendous light and with beauty and with love. And I just think that's also another important takeaway. None of this explains why it happens, and I think we're all clear to that. No one's thinking that way. None of this explains what happens. It's just looking inside and saying, what can I do inside in order to be able to counteract some of this that's going on outside. Okay. Okay, let's. I think that it's interesting. I think that tonight the Mishnah. I'm not going to finish it tonight. I don't think, but tonight's Mishnah is actually it's connected, and you'll see how in a minute. You see the Mishnah on the side. It's still a continuation of last week's Mishnah.
Rabbi, it's not there, and it's not. I can't. It's not in the chat.
It's not in the chat. Okay, so sometimes what happens? Well, you're there, but sometimes when I put something up in the chat, if people hadn't been there yet, so then they can't see the chat. I'm going to put it up again. Can you see it now? You can't see it in the chat?
No.
Wow. Oh, I know why. Okay. So, somebody had said hello to me in the beginning of class, and there, when it says two, it was their name in there, not everybody. Okay, here we go. Thank you for pointing that out to me.
I think it was me.
I wasn't blaming anybody. I certainly wasn't going to name anybody. I don't think it was you, actually. I think it was somebody else, but it's fine. Okay. Does everybody see it now? Okay. Huay Omer used to say, Ben Chamesh Shanim Lemikra. We spoke about that last week, 5-year-old to learning Torah. Ben Eser LeMishnah, a 10-year-old for the Mishnah. Ben Shlosh Esrei LeMitzvos. Ben Chamesh Esrei LeTalmud. Ben Shmona Esrei LeChuppah. Actually, you know what? I realize I don't think we got to Ben Eser LeMishnah, even to the 10-year-old to Mishnah. Mishnah is really a deeper understanding of Torah. It's the oral Torah, right? And the oral Torah, boy, this is going to take me a couple of weeks. This Mishnah, the Mishnah, just a quick review that when God gave the Torah in Mount Sinai, He gave a written Torah and an oral Torah, and the written Torah was written down so that you would never dispute the basics that were there. The oral Torah was given orally because when I give you something orally and I tell you that this is there's no copy of this. Right, and if you want to remember this, you're going to have to commit it to memory. That means you're going to have to spend a lot of time talking to the person who knows it in order to be able to you should get it. And God built that into the system of Torah, that there needed to be a Rebbe, a teacher, and there needed to be a student. And in the Torah's model, Rebbe and teacher and student was father and son. That was the way it was supposed to be. That it was parent and child, and that it was the parent that got the Masorah, that got the tradition from the previous generation, and it was the parent that then passed that on to the next generation. And that's why God gave the Torah orally, because that was the very basis of the system of Judaism. The very basis of the system of Judaism was a thing called Masorah, limsor, to pass on. Now, we still have that, even though all of this is written down, which wasn't supposed to be written. I'll talk about that in a second. But we still have that because most of it can't be understood unless you have a teacher. There's not enough of it written down to be able to do it, for it to become a how-to manual. It's still complicated and still needs a teacher to be able to disseminate it. And therefore, that Sinaitic experience has been preserved. Nevertheless, the study of the Mishnah, once it was written down, which is about 200 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, a rabbi by the name of Judah the Prince, Yehuda Nasi, realized that if he doesn't write this oral Torah down, it's going to be forgotten because people aren't investing the time. They're just not investing the time and the energy into it. It's not important enough to them. And therefore, he wrote it down, bullet points, and that's called the Mishnah. And then from the Mishnah, a few hundred years later, that was still being forgotten. So they wrote down more of the details, and that's called the Talmud. So at 10 comes Mishnah. Now here it doesn't mean literally the study of the Mishnah as we have it, but it means the study of the oral Torah in its almost like base sense, not necessarily the practical understanding of it, but the more theoretical understanding. And at 10, that's when a child is able to start thinking. That's when a child is able to start reasoning, and that's what's being taught to them. You know, we spend in our yeshivas, we spend a lot of time in the study of Talmud. People often say, the study of Talmud is somewhat theoretical. Why are you spending so much time on that? Because we're teaching students how to think. Once you can learn and ration and reason through a Talmud, so then the critical thinking has been taught to you. The method of critical thinking has been taught, and that could be applied to anything. You know, I was just telling over something to a group of seminary girls that it's very interesting that the same part of your brain and the same thought process that's needed for Talmud is the exact same part of your brain and thought process that's needed to be a lawyer. Right? A person who's, you know, there are two types of lawyers, and I realize that we have some here, but there are two types of lawyers. There are those that do lawyering, and there are those that think like lawyers. They think in an analytical, critical sense. And when they read an article in a newspaper, they're doing the same thing as when they're reading some law article with all of its details and arguments that if you want it done this, then that's true. And the law was this way in 1827, but were they deciding it on this way? Were they looking at it from this perspective or looking at it from this perspective? All of that kind of critical stuff, that's what goes into the reasoning and the thinking, and is more than just thinking. It's really a way of seeing the entire world. That a child at the age of 10 is ready to start doing that. Unfortunately, in our schools, we still don't believe that a child at 10 can do anything other than color pictures, right? And when it comes time for the holidays, so, we give them a box of crayons and a piece of paper and say, draw an apple and honey, shkayach, right? Or draw a shofar. But by age 10, a child is capable of thinking and reasoning. And you can talk to a child and explain to them what I'm using, just, this example, but you can explain to them what tshuva is. You can explain to them what an apple and honey is and what it represents, more than just saying it's a sweet new year. The child can reason, can think. And we often don't tap into that. So the Mishnah tells us that at 10, we have to begin to tap into that. But that's just setting the roots. And after we set the roots, the next stage that a child is ready to take is at the age of 15. At the age of 15 to Talmud. Talmud is a deeper set of reasoning, and it is also a practical application. To be able to look at it not just in theoretical terms, but to be able to take that theory and to turn that theory into practice. And this is laying out an educational, a pedagogical educational theory that you have to begin training the mind at 5, you intensify at 10, and you bring it home at 15. And now you've taught a child how to think, not merely how to do math problems or just how to read a textbook and spit it back, but actually how to think. In there is the great transition of bar mitzvah. At the age of 13, a child is capable of keeping mitzvahs. Why is it at 13? Why not at 12? Why not at 15? Why is 13 the time when a child is capable of keeping commandments in the Torah? So I do this exercise with every bar and bat mitzvah child that I teach. And I go through with them and tell them, to explain to them what a bar mitzvah is. We know that there are 613 commandments in the Torah. There are commandments between us and God and commandments between us and other people. Bein adam lechavero, bein adam lemakom. Every commandment in the Torah can also be split into 2 categories, positive and negative. So there's positive commandments, and I always ask them, what's a negative commandment? So a negative commandment is a commandment you don't like doing. A positive commandment, the things you like to do, and negative commandments, things you don't like to do. No, that's not a negative commandment. Positive commandments are things thou shalt do. A negative commandment is things thou shalt not do. There's positive commandments with God, negative commandments with God, and positive commandments to other people, negative commandments to other people. I then ask them to make a list. Any mitzvahs that they know, right? Think of a mitzvah that you know between you and God. That is a positive commandment between you and God. And then I tell them, now think of a mitzvah that's a negative mitzvah. And we make a list of mitzvahs that we know. We don't get to 613, but we just sometimes, depending on the knowledge of the student, we can get to a lot of mitzvahs. And here you're sitting and looking at a list now of mitzvahs between you and God that are positive, you and God negative, you and other people positive, you and other people negative. So then I take the column of the positive mitzvahs between you and God and the negative mitzvahs between you and God. I say, what do you think? What one thing do you think that you need to keep all these tens of mitzvahs? So think about it. What do you need to keep the mitzvahs between you and God? A belief in God. A belief in God is very difficult to keep those mitzvahs. It's very difficult to see the value and the rationality of Shabbos, of kashrus, of any of the holidays, of the mitzvahs of the land, of Shemitah of the 7th year, right? Of all those mitzvahs, it's very difficult. Sacrifice is very difficult to see a reason for them unless God is there. Okay, now let's look over to the second column. The mitzvahs between you and other people. What's the one thing you need to know to keep every mitzvah? Don't steal, don't kill, don't cheat, don't speak lashon hara, don't embarrass a person, give tzedakah, return a lost object. All the things, honor your parents, all the things that exist between one person and another. What do you need in order to be able to keep those mitzvahs? You need an understanding that people are important, that you're not the center of the world. You're not the most important thing in the world. Other people have a value and importance. And when they have an importance, now I want to be careful with them. I don't want to speak about them. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hit them. I don't want to do something that would harm them. So if you take 613 commandments in the Torah, it's two things that you need to know. All you need to know is that there's a God and there's other people. Other people are valuable. When does that happen to a person? It happens at age 13. Talk to a 5-year-old and take a 5-year-old shopping. And what are you going to hear the entire time that you're shopping with the 5-year-old? Give me, buy me, I want, gimme, 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 gimme. Right? We call it, getting the gimmies. Right? It's all about me. As a child grows, take that 5-year-old, put him in a room with another 5-year-old and one toy. What's going to happen? Most likely only one of them is going to come out alive. They're going to be fighting over the toy. But if you turn the volume up, what are you going to hear? It's my toy. No, it's my toy. Because the focus of life is all about themselves. Then as a child grows, a child realizes that if everything is about me and my, then they're going to be disappointed and they're going to have no friends. And it's not going to be a fun life. And then they start to understand that it's not a big circle with me inside of it and then a tiny circle to the side with them, but it's a huge circle with them and a tiny circle on the side that says me. And when life progresses to that place, that when they say I, it's a huge I, it means so many people and so many things, that's when they're capable of keeping mitzvos between one person and another, because that's when they understand the value and importance of other people. Until that moment, you can't demand of somebody who doesn't have the capability of recognizing the value and importance of others to keep mitzvos. You can't tell them you have to love them when you don't have the capacity to love them because you're still in the throes of loving you. At 13, that transitions. At 13, that's the cutoff point. It's the average. Doesn't mean everyone hits it, but that's the average. That's where it's capable of getting that understanding of the value and importance of others. You take that same 5-year-old and you say to the 5-year-old, can I help you get dressed? And the 5-year-old says, no, I can do it myself. Because the other mantra of a 5-year-old is that I can do it alone. I am the king of the world. And that lasts until the first time they get put into timeout. And when they're sitting in that corner, they're realizing, I don't think that I'm what they meant when they say Melech HaOlam. I ain't the king of the universe. My parents are. And then grandparents come to visit. And the grandparents put the parents into place. And the kid looks at it and goes, ooh, I think I'd better be afraid of my grandparents. They're more powerful than my parents. And then you go to parent-teacher conference. And the teacher lets the parents have it for what they're doing to the kid. And then the kid goes, oh, I think my teacher is mightier than my parents. And then the principal. And then the policeman. And then they learn about a governor and a mayor. And then they learn about a president. And then they come to the realization that there is something above all of them. And that's God, who's the true Melech HaOlam. And at what point does that happen? At 13. And until you have a recognition that there is a Melech HaOlam, there is a king of the universe, you can't keep mitzvahs. You can't be demanded to recognize God when you don't have the capacity to recognize God. So at age 13, 12 for a girl, because she is capable of seeing and understanding this a year earlier than a boy is, At age 13 and age 12, a child has the capacity to know two things: to know there's a God, to know that there are other people that are important. And once a child knows those two things, they have everything they need to keep every commandment in the Torah. Because you got to wonder, why aren't we kind to a child? Imagine a poor kid wakes up on his 13th birthday. Happy birthday! I got you 613 presents. And the kid looks at it, huh? And then you want to go back to sleep. No, you can't go back to sleep. You got to go to shul. Huh? And you got to put on phone. Huh? Right? And we knock them out with 613 commandments on one day. Why don't we give them installments? 13th birthday, you get 10 commandments. Then your 15th birthday, you get another 132. On your 18th birthday, now we're really going to get you. We're going to give you 400. Like, give it in stages. Let it like a license. They got to take a little test before it, and they got to get there, because they don't need to. Once you have these two understandings, these are the two keys that open up the entire Torah. You have everything you need to keep mitzvahs at this point. And that's the transition of 13. 13, you don't have to take any tests. You don't have to qualify other than age. And once you hit that, you now are in the world of responsibility. That world of responsibility is in the middle of those 5 years of where you're learning Talmud, of those 5 years where the mind is being trained. In the 10 years, in the 5 years of learning Mishnah, but again of where the mind is being trained. And by the time you hit the 15, which is the Talmud, so there you now have a sense of responsibility to the knowledge that you're learning. You're not just learning knowledge, you feel responsible to it. And that's when it starts to blossom inside of a person. There's a wisdom to the system. Okay, I didn't get to anything yet. We still have 20, 30, 40, 50. We got a whole lifetime to go through yet. 20, 30, 40, 50. And then the most exciting part is 60, 70, 80 is incredible, because 80 says an 80-year-old for Gevura. 80-year-old for power. Can you just imagine that? In a boxing ring, you have a 23-year-old who's got muscles coming out of his muscles, and an 80-year-old, and the 80-year-old is stronger than the 25-year-old. Yeah, what planet is this Mishnah from? Okay, we will see that. God willing, we'll see that in Mitzvah Hashem next week. So Kadosh Baruch Hu should wipe away all tears from the world and all the tears from our eyes, and we should know only from beautiful and happy and wonderful things. Okay. Have a wonderful day, everyone. A wonderful night. And Mitzvah Hashem, we'll see you all next week.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, my pleasure. I'm just going to stop the recording.